Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announcing the U.S. carried out a new military strike on an alleged drug trafficking boat, this time in the Pacific Ocean. Officials say the operation on Tuesday killed both people on board, but it marks the 8th known U.S. strike on an alleged drug smuggling vessel since the beginning of September, but the first in the Pacific. I want to talk more about all of this with retired Army Major Mike Lyons. So let's start there. What do you make of this apparent expansion of the military's campaign against alleged drug trafficking into the Eastern Pacific?
Omar, should come as no surprise that the administration finds a target out in the eastern part of the Pacific and goes after it. Two major highways coming from South America on the water to America. One is through the Caribbean, where we saw the initial strikes take place, but out on the other side of that, in the eastern part of the Pacific, up along the western side of the Mexican coastline, is another highway there. Not a lot of islands to hide behind. It's probably a fast boat that had to try to maneuver out of it, but it's showing capability. This administration is always looking to project power, project deterrence. It said it was going after narco-terrorists, so this should not come as any surprise that they've expanded this capability onto that eastern side of the Pacific, the other side of the highway.
And as we've sort of been talking about here, this is hardly the first time a strike has happened in this manner, though predominantly in the Caribbean to this point. You know, the Southcom commander is resigning. We don't know why he's stepping down, but we do know Hegseth did not believe Admiral Halsey was moving quickly or aggressively enough to combat drug traffickers in the Caribbean. Just what do we know about the leader of Indo-Pacific Command, and is that a dynamic that would prompt someone to step down or feel like they can't move forward with their job in a proper way?
If the admiral felt that he couldn't do that, if he couldn't, his heart wasn't in it, it wasn't ready to accomplish the mission, and he knows the intent of the commander-in-chief as Secretary of War, then he should step down. So I think that's a positive step if that is all to come to be. I know he was there for a while, very highly competent admiral, and obviously wouldn't be in that job if he wasn't the right person to begin with. But as he's looking at the missions and looking at what they were doing, perhaps he had a problem with it. So we'll have a new leader in there, and we'll see how long the missions go on. We'll see if it deters the narco-terrorists from bringing drugs and paraphernalia from South America through those venues.
And that has been the sort of purported mission from the Trump administration to this point, at least what they've projected. And one of the things that Secretary Hegseth wrote was, just as Al-Qaeda waged war on our homeland, these cartels are waging war on our border and our people. Look, I don't think anyone is disputing that cartels can bring violence or are dangerous organizations. But what do you make of that comparison in particular?
Well, Omar, these are tactical strikes. That's first and foremost. If you're going after the strategic capability of the narco-terrorists and those cartels, you have to go after the sources. You have to go in. You have to go where they produce the drugs. You have to go a little deeper besides this transportation, the supply chain. I think they all know that. So this is, again, an easy way for the administration to project power. But if they're going to defeat these kinds of operations, for example, that the drug cartels are doing, it's going to take strategic kind of things and not just these little tactical victories, which again are no match. There's no match of these small boats against the Navy assets that we have in the sea there.
Well, and some of the criticisms of these strikes to this point is to the outside world. It seems like these are purposely publicized, perhaps in a deterrent fashion, as we've talked about, but also that it's sort of shoot first, ask questions later, in the sense that there were survivors of another alleged drug boat attack, and they were repatriated as opposed to questioned over potentially their role in a form of cartel that would be targeted here. And really the question seems to be now, the Trump administration produced a classified legal opinion seeking to justify these legal strikes, and they treat the drug traffickers as enemy combatants who can be summarily killed without any kind of judicial review. Is there room here for additional oversight by Congress or otherwise, or does this fall squarely in the executive branch here?
Yeah, I think there could be. I think their ends justify the means. Excuse here right now is what they're going with, and these are really one-off missions that we're seeing. They're not large scale operations. Surely to say that they fall under the laws of land warfare is likely a stretch. But the president and the executive branch has this power to do this, and he's extending that as far as he can take it right now. He has a Secretary of War who's all into this for sure. He's into putting out those press releases. He's into showing U.S. capability to take these boats out. So I'm going to let the lawyers decide. I know how legal that's going to be. There will be people that argue that even though it's in international waters, these don't pose a threat until they actually hit the United States. By that time, this administration says it's too late.
It's usually a smart call to let the lawyers decide, so I will second you on that front. Major Mike Lyons, appreciate the time and perspective as always.
President Trump confirmed that the U.S. military carried out yet another lethal strike against a suspected drug boat yesterday, killing both people on board. This one happened in the Pacific, unlike the previous 7 strikes, which happened in the Caribbean or the Atlantic. Over the weekend, the U.S. released 2 survivors from one of last week's strikes. They were returned to their home countries of Colombia and Ecuador. CNN's David Culver is in Ecuador right now, and he spoke with the family of one of those survivors. And David, we've heard the president call the people on these boats terrorists. We've heard the administration call them narco-terrorists. From what you've seen on the ground, who are they?
I sat with his sister, who lives about 2 hours from where we are, Jake, on a coastal town. It's a very small fishing village. And I said, do you consider your brother to be a terrorist? And she said, absolutely not. She pushed back on that. She doesn't even consider him to be a criminal. Now, the fact is, he is a criminal because in 2020 he was convicted of drug smuggling in the U.S. off of Mexico's coast. But you've got to build context as to who this individual is. And the reality is he's certainly not one of the higher level cartel members. In fact, many of these individuals are simply fishermen who have either been lured into this, coerced, some of them threatened. Others are doing it for the money, and they admit that. Now, you're seeing some of the images here of us going into a very humble, modest home, and his belongings are still there. His mattress on the floor, his clothes. Interestingly enough, his sister said that when he left several months ago, he told her, I'm going to work, I'm going fishing. He was desperate for money and mountains of debt, yet he left behind his fishing gear. So that was obviously suspicious to her at the time. Still, Jake, she stands by saying that he is not a criminal and that he is just being sucked up in what is a really difficult system.
And David, you've spent more than 2 weeks this year following the narco-trafficking route through Ecuador. The Trump administration says these new strikes are aimed at stopping drugs from flooding into the United States. Are they hitting the right targets?
I guess the question here is, Jake, what are the targets? Because if you're looking to stop drugs that are causing overdoses in the U.S., that's fentanyl. I've spent weeks in Mexico before following that route all the way up across the border, most of it carried over by U.S. citizens, according to law enforcement on the U.S. side of things. And so if they're trying to then stop drugs coming out of South America, particularly places like Colombia and Venezuela, they're talking about cocaine. Jake, the vast majority of cocaine, however, comes out of Ecuador, where I am. More than 70% leaves here.
All right, David Culver in Ecuador. Thank you so much.